This video is over topic 4 practice questions. This is interpreting graphs. There'll be a little bit about reading graphs here as well, which is more what you'll actually be asked in direct homework questions. So let's look here. Number 1, this is a picture of a kind of a pie chart showing a breakdown and looking at how this chart is potentially misleading. And the main thing here is that that protein section is much larger than it should be, considering it's 32 grams and the carbs are 81 grams. Then the slice for the carbs should be larger than the slice for protein. So carb slice should larger than protein slice. So I would assume this is a package from some sort of protein product that is emphasizing the amount of protein, but thereby de-emphasizing the amount of carbs in a way that's possibly misleading. Next example, we have some stock prices for the last month and for the last year. So a little bit of graph reading. These are line graphs. During which month did the stock have the largest decrease in value? So if I look at each month, kind of from the beginning of the month to the end of the month, or I can kind of see there's one very large decrease. I don't think any of the others, even throughout the whole month, have that much of a decrease. And that could be interpreted as like the largest kind of all at once decrease versus like the largest overall decrease. If we go, like maybe from here to here at the end of the month, or March, or for March starts maybe from here down to here, like the how far down it went at once, or even though it has ups and downs versus largest, but let's call it this is the largest decrease all at once. And then reading the graph, we look here, whenever you're reading a graph, you want to look at the labels that it falls in between, which is here October and December. That would mean that right in here would be November 2024. And so this is falling between the November and December, so it's within November of 2024. Then if we want during which month did the stock have the lowest value, we're just looking for on that red line where it's going up and down, or on this green line, where does it have the lowest point, but not on the green line, because here the lowest goes down to 92. This goes down to 80. And this is only showing, again, part of May and June. And so that would be somewhere up here. But this lowest point and this lowest point are still higher a little bit than this lowest point there in April. So April 2025. And as far as potentially misleading, the main thing is like if someone just showed you that 1 month graph to show like, look, this stock is steady, or it's even somewhat increased from the beginning of the month to the end of the month, it's green, then that doesn't show the big picture of, if you look back for the whole year, you can see that, yeah, it's leveled out at a much lower level than what it had been. So focusing on a shorter time frame can be used to hide the big picture. Then next, number 3, we have a bar graph here, and we'll get a little bit of practice reading this bar graph. What was the interest rate for 2011? So here's the 2011 bar. the interest rate for that is where the top of the bar lands. It's here halfway between these lines at 3.146 and 3.148. And so right in between those would be 3.147%. If you need to calculate the midpoint of two numbers, you add them up and divide by 2. You may not have needed to do any particular calculation on this to figure out what's halfway between, but if you did need to, you could do 3.146 plus 3.148 and then divide that result by 2. So you can do the addition, hit equals, and then divide. Otherwise, you need to use parentheses when you're doing that in the calculator. Then the other question with these graphs is if we look at the 2008 and 2009 bars here and look at the height of each bar, you can see visually there that the 2009 bar is about double the height of the 2008 bar. So then the question is, did the interest rate actually double from 2008 to 2009? And if we look at reading what these rates actually are, of where the top of the bar lands, 2008 is 3.141, 2009 is 3.142. They've definitely not doubled. That's just a tiny little increase there from 3.141 to 3.142. So it definitely did not double. So what is it about this graph that makes it look double when it's really not double? We're looking at the top of the bar to state to say the interest rate for that year. But let's look here. The bottom of all of these bars is at 3.140. So it's not starting at 0. If we wanted to start at 0, we would have to go probably dozens of pages down, because even this is going from 3.14 to 3.15 is this far. And we would have to do that distance to get to 3.13, 3.12, 3.11, 3.10. We would have to do that several hundred times to get all the way down to 0. So if we looked at this from 0, so if this scale was going from 0, and let's say up to 4, so we'd have like 2, 3. So here's 3, and then this would be 3.5, maybe 3.1 would be here, and 3.2, and this would be 3.15. Like all of our bar heights would be right around here, around the 3.15, and you'd barely be able to see, if at all, to see the difference from one to another. So this graph clearly, like, they're focusing on the tops of the bars to emphasize the change that's happening. Whether that's a valid thing to do or not kind of depends on the context and what the goal is of what they're trying to show with the graph. Certainly, if they're trying to describe these as large increases based on, like, look how much bigger the graph, the bar is, that would be misleading. But if they're just saying, like, it is steadily increasing, like if we were just looking at it, it would look flat, but it is slightly increasing from year to year, then that could be valid. But starting at 3.140, the scale here, the vertical scale of what it's counting by here is like 0.002, very small. But they've kind of stretched that out to make it potentially look bigger than it is if you're not paying attention. Number 4, we have a pie chart here. So pie chart is saying, like, what proportion of a group have different characteristics. this case, what time they feel they're most productive. For this bar graph to work, you have to be able to see the colors well. So you have to be on a good screen. You have to not be colorblind. If you printed it out, it would potentially lose. If it was printed in black and white, you would be able to tell. And we have to kind of just visually look at the size of the slices. If we're looking for what time of day did the smallest percentage feel they're most productive, we first need to figure out which slice is the smallest one. And that seems to be the purple, this one here. Smallest slice there. And it's, I think, far enough off from the orange that it's pretty clear that one's smaller. But you could have a pie chart where they might be close enough that it'd be harder to tell. And then I have to find the purple over here in what's called the legend, which is over here after office hours. And then what percentage, to say what percentage, I have to be able to just kind of look at the graph, say what fraction, turn that into a percent, or know how the percentages correspond. It's going to be a rough estimate. We're looking at most productive in the late morning, early afternoon. So I have to start with the legend, late morning, early afternoon here. That's this dark green, which is this slice. And looking at this slice, it looks to be somewhat less than a fourth because that dark blue there up here looks pretty close to exactly a fourth. This one's definitely smaller than that. Might be somewhere. So a fourth would be 25%. This is maybe somewhere around 20%, rough estimate. But so this graph, like it may be a completely accurate graph, but it's not a great graph as far as functionality. So going on to number 5, we have the exact same information in this graph. The colors happen to be different. That's not super relevant, but the main thing here is that we have the category directly labeled on the slice. So there's no having to figure out the colors and matching those up. If it's printed in black and white, anything like that, it's still perfectly functional. And it has the percentages included on those labels as well. So we can see confirm last few office hours here, 13%. After office hours, 9% is that lowest percentage. So that question 4A there would be much easier to answer from this question. And then what percentage feel they're most productive in the late morning, early afternoon? Again, I just need to find that label. I don't define label, find color, like it reduces the steps needed. Late morning, early afternoon, and it has the percentage on there for me, so I don't have to estimate and figure that out. So potential color issues are taken out of the picture there with this new graph. The need to estimate relative size and percentages, estimation. So in the first graph, it just had to kind of estimate based on what you could see versus here. With this one, you could, if you wanted to be more precise, get out a protractor and measure the angle and divide it by 360 and do all that. But just having it there on the graph, it's already there. So your homework activity 1, you're creating a graph that looks like this one. So with the percentages, with the labels on the slices. Not this one. So not going to have this. You're going to have the percentages and the slices. So there's detailed instructions of how to do that in Excel. And it's really just a few clicks to get Excel to do that for you. Then last example here, we have these 2 graphs. These are bar graphs of internet users in millions and internet penetration. And again, a little bit of practice of rating graphs. What continent uses the internet the most? So that would be the largest bar, but which graph are we looking at? Because one, the largest bar is Asia, the other, the largest bar is North America. So you have to think about what does most mean. And there's not like a one right answer to this. This is to kind of show that it can be unclear. So is what continent uses the most? Is that the one that has the most people on that continent using the internet? That would be Asia. If it's what continent is mostly like most of the people on that continent use the internet, would be North America. So most, put it this way, most internet users on the continent would be Asia versus most on the continent using internet would be North America. And there's a lot of the same words there, they're just in different order, but it changes the meaning of what we're saying there. So questions about most, least, aren't always as straightforward as they seem like they should be when we have things with the percentage or relative amount versus the actual numbers. So how many internet users are there in Asia? How many internet users? That's the first one. This is in millions. So these labels down here tell how many million. And we're looking at the end of this bar here, and it's somewhere between 2,000 and 2,200. It's less than half if I look up at the top here. So let's say approximately, I'm going to say approximately 2,050, so 2,100. I'm going in about halfway, so this would be 2,100. So 2,050 million. Then I would adjust that. That's not standard of how we would state that amount of money. It's bigger than the millions level. I'm going to go up a level and call this 2.05 billion. I could probably just roughly say a little over 2 billion. Then if we want the percentage for Asia, it's here just below, and we're going from 40 to 50. That's probably about 49%. You always want to look again at the labels before and after, because if this was at 50, but this was 46, or if this was 20, it would change what I would approximate that to be. Let's say 49, it might be more like 48, 48, 49, somewhere in there. The thing to be aware of is either of these graphs by themselves misses an important part of the picture. So looking at the percent graph, you always have the other half. It's out of 100% would be everybody. So we can see there's only a small portion of people in North America not using the internet, whereas over half people in Asia are not using the internet, and even more so in Africa. But if we're talking about purely like how many people, like there could be 2 people in North America, there could be like 100 people in North America, and that 95 people using the internet, and there could be, you know, a trillion people or like 10 billion people, whatever. Like we don't know anything about the relative sizes of those continents to say what is this a percent of. So if we care about like the actual numbers of people using the internet, then we get this. We can see that there's far more people in Asia using the internet because Asia has far more people in it to begin with. But just looking at this numbers graph doesn't tell us anything about the even more so people in Asia not using the internet. So it's just either of these by themselves doesn't give the whole picture.